Gentlemen, if you want to look your best with high-quality clothing, then I recommend Main Street Clothiers and Custom Tailors in downtown Newcastle. Mike Caggiano is the owner, and he and his staff have been in the business for decades, and they will always give you the right recommendations. They also carry Rondinelli tuxedos. That's Main Street Clothiers and Custom Tailors, 210 East Washington Street, downtown Newcastle. Call 724-652-3851. Daimio and Olson Law Group, where every client matters. Serving Newcastle, Elwood City, and Youngstown. Daimio and Olson handles criminal law, bankruptcy, civil matters, workers' compensation, personal injury, medical malpractice, divorce, wills, real estate, and many more legal issues. Call any one of their offices in Newcastle, Elwood City, or Youngstown with these phone numbers. Open Monday through Friday, 9 to 5. Daimio and Olson Law Group, where every client matters.
Hi, welcome back to the Washington Outsider on NCTV45. This is host Matthew Geiger from the Washington Outsider. Visit us for our latest take of the news of the day on www.washingtonoutsider.org. Today, I wanted to spend a little time. We've been having a little bit of a conversation trying to tie it in what's going on in the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. As we know, we've had budget issues, and really it's kind of started more and more to mirror what's happened in the federal government. We did have a temporary resolution, about 6 months of funding's going out. That's kind of kicked the can down the road, and basically that's really what we're seeing going on the national level. That's what we're starting to see from, the same pattern that we see the federal government doing in the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania, which is where we film, which is where I'm from, is we're starting to duplicate a lot of the government. Before, you could come to Pennsylvania, and if you noticed in the elections over the year, we have Republican governors, we have Democratic governors, we have Democratic senators, Republican senators, and it goes back and forth. You might consider us one of the purple states. We voted for Obama both times. We helped in the Bushes, the Clintons. So, we really kind of, we're what you would consider maybe a purple state. And so whenever it comes to, kind of looking at examples of where we're headed, Pennsylvania serves as a really good example of the country's mood, because we tend to switch, and people who tend to be on one side or the other tend to come out more during elections. And so when it comes to this budget issue, of course, we had over 6 months without a budget, and now we have some funding coming. But, the problem's gone away. Just like we see in the federal government, they passed a resolution. The emergency's been averted. But now it's sinking in to where the state legislator is just kind of avoiding the problem. They're moving on as business as usual. There's no problem. We'll deal with this when it comes up in 6 months. And that's the kind of dysfunction that's really plagued Washington for years on end. And so what we're seeing is kind of a development of that pattern. And really, if we want to understand how to break that pattern in the federal level, we have to understand how to break it on the small level. If you're from the right, this might resonate with you more. Local governments where the solution is. Well, if we can't find the solution on the Pennsylvania side, if we can find it, I should say, then we can have a better understanding of how to deal with this on a federal level. But, Pennsylvania isn't the end all of all states. It was the second state or Commonwealth to become part of the United States. It would have been first if Delaware had belonged to, kept belonging. But so, we can look at another example of states, and one really good example is California. Now, California is one of the most economic powerhouses of our country. It also tends to be very liberal. So it's kind of gives us a capture of what happens when we've really kind of done the budgetary issue where we're big spending, the big government models, and where are the issues. If you go back again to Pennsylvania and our overall country, a lot of this fight is rooted in big government. In Pennsylvania particularly, we have exploding pension issues with our state budget, with our state workers. There's a feeling on the right that state unions have really helped kind of get more benefits to public workers than they should have. And then on the left, it's more of a view of we have too much, or we've made these promises and we need to keep them. And so when it comes down, this is kind of a really an example, a good example of the whole big government versus small government issue. And so that's really where we fall on when it's kind of the mirror, the reflection. So in dealing with this big government versus small government, this big spending versus small, we're also talking about taxes. And so when it comes to, we can really kind of get an analogous situation between the two. Well, when we come back, we'll, we can start talking about a little more about what lessons we can learn from California. Thank you.
Tuscany Square Restaurant, 3470 Wilmington Road, where old world charm meets today's modern conveniences. You'll enjoy their spacious, comfortable seating, their fresh ingredients that go into making every dish, whether it's pizza or that just right entree. Tuscany Square Restaurant, they're here to serve you. Call 724-654-3065.
InfoCision has been giving job seekers career opportunities for the past 30 years. 150 positions are needed to be filled as soon as possible, and many of them at the Newcastle location. InfoCision handles inbound and outbound customer service and sales calls for the nation's largest nonprofit and leading media and cell phone providers. Come join the InfoCision team that offers excellent benefits. You can call or stop in at 253 East Washington Street, Newcastle. InfoCision, the #1 call center company in the world.
Come dine with us, come dine today. If you could use some real good food, there's a place not far away. If you could use a drink or two, or a place to go and play, come to Gallows Italian Villa today.
The Crane Room is a restaurant. The Crane Room is a bar. The Crane Room is a banquet facility. The restaurant will please you time after time with their diverse menu. Ask about their daily specials. See the menu at craneroom.com. The bar gives you an abundance of choices with 35 beers on tap and always changing. Their banquet services are always to perfection. The Crane Room, located at 3009 Wilmington Road in Neshannock Township. Call 724-656-1553.
Hi, welcome back to Washington Outsider on NCTV45. This is Matthew Geiger from the Washington Outsider. Visit us for our latest take on the news of the day on www.washingtonoutsider.org. And today we're talking about kind of a big issue of big government. And as we know, in recent years, Washington has become particularly dysfunctional. Now, we know D.C. has always had its kind of insider politics. This side benefits from the other. And this has caused a lot of issues. Burgeoning debt, for example, a big one. And that's created a lot of tension. Well, it's not only in the federal government level, it's also on the state level. And, of course, in Pennsylvania, we've been talking about how that's really reflected in the budget battle. And one of the biggest contentious issues is pensions. And, of course, that affects the daily life. And for those who want to see small government, government doesn't spend, that's a big issue. But we can look at another. We need to look at another example to really understand the issue. And one of those, a good example, is California. California tends to be very liberal, but it's been a largely successful state. It's had big taxes. It's had big government funding. It's had to sense the Great Recession kind of pull back some. But it's also, and that's when it's really caused a lot of problems. And now, one of their big issues is that before the Great Recession hit, really about a fifth of the jobs in this country existed in California. And at first I heard that and I thought, well, that can't be true. But as it turns out, it is a rather large state, and they do have a lot of industries, and these are a lot of paying jobs. This is kind of a bastion for liberal economics. And so we can look at it and say, well, now that they're in a crisis mode, how are they able to cope with it? I mean, these guys have been able to push through, deal with poverty. They have a lot of social programs. So it's kind of what happens in crisis, which is really the question of any successful economic policy, is when you have economic troubles, how do you cope with it? Well, okay, so one of those big issues, and you can go back to the 1970s and you can look at a plan, Prop 13. And what Prop 13 was a housing bill that basically capped the value of houses to about 2% of raising every year. And it also left government unable to raise interest or taxation, property tax rates above 1%. And when you do things like that, the 2% evaluation, you create kind of a distorting effect. And you add to it whenever you do other things. For example, the state, if you were to sell your property, the new owner would have the property reassessed and the value would go up. And that creates this kind of a distortion. And so the newer owners have a higher tax burden versus the older one. And some have argued that that's created a lot of issues in terms of housing. Others would say, well, it saved the place. It saved the rates from going up. It's also kind of created a preferential loopholes for businesses. So businesses in their corporate world have basically used the system to kind of transfer ownership between each other to really make some issues. The big issue for the state is that because the property rate can't go up, the taxation can't go up, they can't raise taxes to cover funding. So whenever the funding goes down, and because it's based on the value the state has spent, it creates a deficit in the system. It creates a deficit for local governments because the interest rates actually tie to it. So if the value of the house is gone, say in a Great Recession or a mortgage meltdown, suddenly the tax revenue is not there. The tax revenue they've gotten used to. Now, kind of a lot of blame is placed on this program, but when it comes down to it, it's also kind of limited the ability of the government to grow. It hasn't been able to grow as fast as maybe it would in California. So this is really what it's kind of done, is it's kind of showed that you can only limit government so far, that you can't just limit the growth of government by cutting taxes. And that's really a mirror to the federal government. Since Ronald Reagan was president, we've really tried to cut back taxes, but the spending hasn't come. We've ended up with a system where we have tax and spend liberals and then spend and don't tax Republicans. And that mirror you can kind of see. There's a lot of pension obligations in places like in the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania, as well as several other states, because of that mentality. The view is that we can cut taxes now and that'll stunt government from growing, or it'll create an incentive for government to control the size of it, to not become bigger. Well, instead it hasn't. What it's done is it's kind of allowed governments to displace the cost onto their issues. And so there's this Prop 13 is very important in California. For those who don't know, is that it's basically the way Social Security reform is in all of the overall country. Is if you try to talk about reforming this Prop 13, because it does distort the economy, there's a lot of political backlash to it, and so that's kind of it kind of shows the kind of mentality that's gone on. And whenever it comes down to it, is that you have a situation where they won't change a law for the benefit, and what that creates is a continued imbalance to where the federal government or the state government cannot address its deficit issues. It cannot address housing costs for younger people and older people who aren't necessarily paying the fair share. So what it's ended up doing is it's actually displaced the cost of government. So instead of older homeowners who, in argument, on the poverty side, this tax alleviates older couples with limited income, whereas older retirees with a great deal of income, it also creates a situation where they are taxed less than younger people who are just starting out in life and have less taxes. And so it's created kind of a regressive tax system where the younger generation, the new homeowners, are sharing a higher burden. And so when there's an economic decline, that situation is exacerbated because suddenly home values fail, and that means older Americans are paying even less. Their taxes are going down, the discount they already have. Younger people are too, but that leaves an even greater deficit to the state of California. And because they have such high government spending, they aren't making the issue. And so, the basic situation is that this cutting taxes, cutting these spending doesn't actually stop government from spending more. It just displaces the cost elsewhere and makes it harder to fix the problem. In the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania, we have that issue because our government spending's gone up, our promises with pensions have gone up, and we've kind of kicked the can down the road to where we have all these obligations paying later, not taxing now, the inability to tax now. And that's, again, something that's mirrored across the whole country. We've taken on all this debt as a country, hope the economy grow up. Instead, we're subjected to these same economic failures. We're subjected whenever the economy slows down, we don't have the tax money to pay off the debt. And so what we've done is we've essentially proven that cutting government spending doesn't stop big government from growing. And it also, at the same time, it prevents government from being effective. Well, there's a lot kind of riding in this conversation, and maybe these points don't exactly make sense, but when we come back, we're going to kind of try and pull them together and get really an idea of what it takes to address this issue of inefficient government, these dysfunctions, and really this what the right wing sees as a big government problem. We'll be right back after you hear from some of our great local sponsors.
Wow, yes, it's fun to go to the Y, and now with great affordable rates, it's more swimming, more exercise, more family time. The YMCA in downtown Newcastle or the Y Zone on Eleanor Drive in Shannon Township welcomes you to a variety of programs, exercise, and fun events.
Hello, folks. Angelo Parada for Ferrone Brothers. Wow, you have to try their food. Great Italian food and 2 locations on the south side on Mill Street and on Wilmington Road in Newcastle. Ferrone Brothers for pepperoni rolls, pizza, any Italian dish that you can imagine. Okay, and a whole lot more. It's Ferrone Brothers. Stop by. They have those daily specials, and they look forward to seeing you. Tell them NCTV45 sent you.
Whether it's a scheduled appointment or same-day service, DiCaprio Carpet Cleaning offers 24/7 service for commercial, industrial, and residential, as well as fire and water damage restoration. Using state-of-the-art technology, DiCaprio Carpet Cleaning experts are ready to professionally clean your carpet today. Call DiCaprio Carpet Cleaning for a free in-home estimate. Thank you for making us Lawrence and Mercer County's largest carpet cleaner.
And remember, nobody gets your carpet cleaner.
It's Little Johnny's Pizza 2 in downtown Newcastle with a great variety menu that you will tell everybody about. Chris Quiera, the owner, is here with more information.
Stop down and see us at Little Johnny's 2. We're located at 130 East Washington Street, or give us a call at 724-657-2210.
Hi, welcome back to the Washington Outsider on NCTV45. This is Matthew Geiger from WashingtonOutsider.org. Come visit us for our latest news of the day. Today we've been talking about kind of some of the dysfunction that's gone on, and really one of the root causes, or really push against that, the polarization, the issues that have kind of created this dysfunction toward the country apart, is the notion of big government. This, and the charge has come a lot from the right on this idea, is that the government's too big, it's too intrusive, it spends too much money. Well, the first thing I think you really have to say is kind of to bring, all this information together is one, we've looked at Pennsylvania as a good example of kind of a middle ground state that goes between, the conservative side and the liberal side, and we see this issue repeated. We also see it in a liberal, state like California, where they've engaged in policies to try and limit issues, and that's ended up displacing costs onto different generations. So instead of older homeowners are getting higher or getting tax breaks, but now that kicks the burden of government onto younger generations. At the same time, there's corporate benefits towards new beneficiaries, and versus people who want to start a business, your taxes are going to be higher. If you merge with another corporation, you can maintain lower taxes. So it's really kind of a displaced thing. And what we've learned is that cutting government revenue, cutting taxes doesn't work. In California, for example, they're capped at a 2%. Their property assessment valuations can't go up more than 2% if you're an old owner. So what that creates is a situation whereas if the government keeps the local governments reassessing you another 2% at the maximum, your taxes will continue to go up that 1% at the new value of your home. Well, that's exactly what's happened. And so it didn't really necessarily solve the tax issue. It didn't really prevent government from growing so big that the people couldn't support it. In fact, it kind of exasperated some of the issues because it brought, instead of being able to just tax properly, they ended up having higher sales tax, taxing on fees. So you've ended up a lot of displacement here. In the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania, we just saw with the Tom Corbett administration, fees, and then Tom Wolf comes in, he tries to tax, and we have a rebellion. And I'm not necessarily saying anything wrong about the Republicans or the Democrats. I think in normal years they're fair-minded, but in Pennsylvania I think it's been known for not necessarily having that partisan divide, especially on the local level. There's the Republicans and Democrats. So the situation of this big government motif is kind of gotten bigger, and these are real economic issues. It's not just a kind of a fable of big government. There's issues, but the first thing I think you have to say is that we hear a lot about this big government notion. The government growing, we often think of it in terms of the budget. It's a $4 trillion budget. That's not really government size. That's the spending of government. That's how much is spent. And you could not add more people into the government all you wanted to. You could cut employees, but the spending will keep going up. And we see this on the defense side especially, where it seems to be no limit in place. So the problem isn't necessarily that the government's getting bigger, and it's not necessarily that it's connected to this big spending. And so we have to really just differentiate between that. When it comes to government growth in actual size, the concern is that it's becoming too intrusive in our lives. Well, if you take like you take like Food and Drug Administration, you want them to be able to really inspect drugs coming in from, say, China, where regulations are looser. And so you need that department to grow. And that's going to be more spending. At the same time, you don't want the government necessarily to grow too big on the spending side, because that creates fiscal issues. But they're not one and the same. So that's something we really need to get through, that government growth is not necessarily budgetary growth. And of course, we pay our subcontractors more and more, and we have increased liabilities for our government employees. They get paid more. So it's wrong to actually connect them too. And so now that we've kind of separated that notion, we can deal with the spending issue and also the intrusiveness. When it comes to government intruding with programs, say for instance the EPA, there's a lot of anger over the EPA's change in regulation. That's an issue that must be dealt with politically. When we talk about the growth of your government, that becomes a different kind of situation. That becomes, I think by separating, we become less emotional, where we can deal with it as an economics. And of course, there's no real incentive to cutting taxes, because they just learn how to, essentially the government's learned to do is displace the cost. We'll tax, we'll fee, we'll borrow, and so that it doesn't actually control that spending. So what really has to happen is we have to work on the efficiency of government in order to prevent government spending from ballooning, to really bring those numbers down. And that includes in the military, and that includes in social services, where we have to actually deal with the dysfunction of public welfare system. We have to actually make it into a system that helps springboard people, and that requires dealing with the psychology. We've talked about this on the show, on my blog, on the Washington Outsider. There's articles on it where we actually discuss what the real problem you're facing in terms of community issues, economic issues. They must be faced, and also the psychological. At the same time, we're talking about issues with corruption in government. A lot of times our government tends to be very self-serving, and that's not something that can be dealt with economically. There's no incentives you can create. And again, we've talked about this also, and you can go back and review it on our blogs, and you can watch it on the Washington Outsider, also the Washington Outsider on Communities Digital News. If you can either go through NCTV45.com, we're at the top, or you can go through the WashingtonOutsider.org. Under the menu button, you'll see 2 on CDN and 2 on NCTV45. That'll link you back to our various programs, and you can search through that. But the issue here is that when we look at the political system, it tends to be very emotional based. We respond emotionally to products. So if we can't deal with the situation economically, if we can't deal with the situation emotionally, that means we have to deal with it socially. And that means we have to change attitudes, the way our communities respond to our government. And it's not just about getting angry. We have to really confront both sides of the issues. We have to confront spending in the military, particularly on contractors and big ticket item spending. We also have to confront the social welfare programs and how we can make it more efficient. We have to confront this mentality of I'm in government to serve myself. You look in the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania, and we've talked about this, we tend to, Governor Wolf's gotten a lot of flack, and he's been kind of vilified, and you see this with people like President Obama, you see this in different states, but you can take him out and put another person in there, and they're going to generate the same negative personality. We've met these people. We've dealt with them. My producers actually spent 2 hours with Tom Wolf before, and they're decent people. In their position, they get kind of bad-mouthed, belittled a lot, but that's because of the anger over the issues. And so we have to create these kind of social incentives where we're not going to just rely on this culture. We're no longer going to accept this culture where we want to create a situation where it's culturally unacceptable to be a self-serving government leader, that you're here to serve the common interest, that you're here to do this. You're not here to get a big tax break. You're not here just to, get your next job out when you leave government. You're not here to, get your big pension and minimize the amount of work you got to do. That there has to be a cultural backlash, and there has to be kind of a merging of our culture. And we've talked about what it means to be in a democracy on the Washington Outsider, and that requires civic engagement. And again, you can watch our old episodes on that. But this civic engagement means that we have to re-engage. We have to merge the political world back into our culture in order to get it under control. And that is the only way we're going to deal with this big government spending, this big government, overgrowth. And there's people who will argue that there's areas that have overgrown. I think at the big time, a lot of the issues, the spending, and that puts us in economics, but there's a culture issue right there between our government, between the way we engage, and we have to deal with these issues. Well, thank you for joining us. I think this is, we're kind of seeing in Pennsylvania the start of a kind of a downward slide. In our country, we're kind of stuck in a rut here, but the more we talk about these things, the more we're able to actually work through it. And I know it's a slow process, but as we move through this, as we discuss it, as we kind of put pressure, we can change our attitudes, change our emotions, change the economics, and really start healing our country, bringing people together, and getting over this big government, this big spending issues that we do have. Well, thank you for joining us.
If you're having a party, then Keystone Specialty is the place you need to go. Yes, they have every party supply that you can imagine. Planning that wedding, that graduation, or maybe it's just that big game that's coming up, go to Keystone Specialty. Party supplies and so much more. Remember, they have those fall decorations, winter, spring, and summer. It's Keystone Specialty on the south side of Newcastle, Mill Street.
Butts Flowers and Gifts offers top quality flower arrangements and gifts for any occasion. The pros at Butts Flowers and Gifts provide exceptional customer service, and each bouquet is hand arranged. Stop in and check out their wide selection of gift baskets and plants. They provide flower delivery service locally to Newcastle, Bessemer, Edinburgh, New Wilmington, West Pittsburgh, and across the nation. It's Butts Flowers at 120 East Washington Street in downtown Newcastle. Call 724-652-7727 or toll free 1-800-443-7726. The Cedars is a great restaurant with outstanding Mediterranean food. The Cedars takeout menu is second to none, featuring pizza, stromboli, hoagies, their famous lamb on the rod, and so much more. So when you're hungry and you want that Newcastle taste, make it Cedars. Now with 2 locations in Newcastle, 827 Addis Street on the east side and 1101 Highland Avenue. Call Cedars East 724-658-9260 or Cedars North 724-652-7657.
Hello, friends. Are you a person on the go? Do you need snacks, cookies, maybe just a deli sandwich, lottery, or gas? It's Geno's in Mahoning Town for all your needs. Stop by Geno's and tell them NCTV45 sent you.